Right, we are now in session 3 of this course, Cost and Management Accounting, session 3. And in session 3, we are going to look at one of the key elements of cost. One of the key elements of cost that we identified in our previous session. Recall that in our previous session of cost classification, codification, and behavior, what we did in session 2 is to look at cost classification, and we saw that in line with CIMA, that cost classification is the arrangement of cost into logical groups. Arrangement of cost into logical groups, whether it is in line with nature, that is, whether in line with the nature of that cost, that is to say that whether it is fixed, variable, or value adding, whether it is function, that is whether it is production, selling, or whether it is in line with elements of cost, which has to do with material, labor, and expenses. So we studied that in session 2. We also studied cost codification, which involves the use of codes to ease the classification. We said in session 2 that mere cost classification will not yield the desired result if the cost or the elements of cost are not codified. And we saw that there are two basic methods that we can codify our classifications. Whether we use the mnemonics method or we use the mnemonics method, or we use the decimal method. Either of them is acceptable. So that's what we did in session 2. So we are coming in session 3 to now look at the elements of cost. Recall that in our previous sessions we broke down cost into 3 basic elements: material, labor, and expenses. So we are going to take material expenses we're going to take it as the first thing in session 3. So in this session 3, we are expected to go home, or we're expected to take away, from this study, 3 basic things. One is to identify the store function and activities. Identify store function and activities. We are also expected to explain receipt and storage of materials. We are also expected to explain pricing of issues and valuation of stock. Pricing of issues and valuation of stock. So these are the basic takeaway that we need to or we must know in session 3. Now, materials, store functions, and activities. That is our subtopic number 1. Materials, store functions, and activity. Now, it's important to know that as far as production is concerned, especially manufacturing business, material cost is a significant portion of the total cost of any manufacturing business. Material costs. Recall that we identified some material costs to include raw materials, work in progress, components, and what have you. In manufacturing setups, material costs are very, very significant portion of cost. They constitute a large, over 60% of the total cost of a cost unit in a manufacturing setup. So to minimize cost, material cost control is very, very important in a manufacturing setup. Material cost control to ensure that there are no leakages, there are no loopholes, there are no excesses. It is important in a manufacturing setup. So we're now going to look at certain things. What is a material? What are materials? Now, materials include stock items, stores item, merchandise, inventory. All right. A stock can be defined as any tangible material asset that an organization uses other than fixed assets. I repeat, a stock can be defined as any tangible material asset that an organization uses in its production other than fixed assets. So stores could now include your raw material, work in progress, finished goods, merchandise that is bought for resale, any part of material like component parts and things like that be identified as materials, so as a stock. So like I said, stores include all tangible materials, all tangible material assets that an organization uses other than fixed assets. All tangible material assets other than fixed assets which an organization uses in its business. And like we say, material cost is a significant cost in a manufacturing setup. It constitutes over 60% of the total cost. So the efficient management of store items, the efficient management of stock items is key is very important in a manufacturing setup. Now let's look at functions, store functions and activities. Store functions and activities. Now, one of the key activities or functions in a store is purchasing function. Purchasing function includes identifying and defining the need for items of stores and supply. All right. So one of the things you do in the store department or in the stock department of any manufacturing setup is to identify the items that are needed, for the production of goods in that very, manufacturing unit. So they are also involved in negotiating they're involved in negotiating the cost of those items with suppliers. They are involved in identifying and evaluating, quality control, quality aspects of these, items that are being, bought by the company. So in the store, they are involved in receiving and evaluating, those items that have come in, those materials that have come in, that has been used in the store. They are also involved in issuing out those items. For example, when the employees in the factory need items, it is the store office or the store employee that is responsible for issuing those items. So let's also look at stock control issues. Stock control issues involve stock recording, stock checking, planning of replenishment, and then evaluation of stock. All right. So these are the issues that we are looking at now. So in summary, when we look at purchasing in a manufacturing setup, what we see there is the store operations and then the stock control. Basically, that is what you see in the purchasing, department of a manufacturing setup, a manufacturing entity or a manufacturing company. So that is that. So let's look at now factors that facilitate effective material cost control. Factors that facilitate effective material cost control. Factors that facilitate effective material cost control. Now, to control material cost is very, very necessary, very, very important in a manufacturing setup. So the following factors are very, very important. One, budget of material usage and purchases. It is important that the company budgets or have a plan of the materials that are being needed in production. So once there is a plan, once there is an understanding of what is needed, this plan or understanding is documented, and that becomes a budget for that very activity. So another important control system or for material is the handling of purchases by competent and qualified employees. It is important that the handling of materials is being done by qualified employees to ensure that, to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. It is important that documentations and accounting systems and control systems are being, installed in that company to ensure proper documentation and recording of items. So that is that. Now let's look at procurement of materials and documentation. Recall that what we are doing here is that we are looking at issues of materials, store functions, and activities. That is what we are looking at in this subsection. And we have looked at what a material is. We have looked at what a store function and its activities are. We have also looked at factors that facilitate effective cost material. So what we are looking at now is production of materials and documentation. Production of material. So it is the responsibility of the purchasing unit or the procurement unit in that company to ensure that there is an effective system of procurement of materials. So to purchase materials and put them in store involve the following. 1. Supplier selection, preparation of purchases order, monitor of supplier performance to ensure that what they supply is the desired quantity and the desired quality, and also to negotiate and renegotiate with contract with suppliers regarding prices, regarding rebates, regarding whatever that is necessary to ensure that those products are supplied. So they are also responsible for providing information for management planning, and then also review of purchase specifications and what have you. So now let's look at methods of purchasing. Methods of purchasing. Methods of purchasing. Methods of purchasing can be through verbal contracts, by verbal contracts of purchase. It can also be through standard purchase order forms, in which case requisitions are raised. It can also be through simplified order forms, so depending on which method the company uses. We will also look at settlement methods. Settlement methods means, the methods that you use in settling for purchases that have been supplied. It could be cash, it could be, check, it could also be through transfers, it could also be through part check and part, transfers. So it all depends, on what the organization is using. All right. So we are going to look at another session, which is another subsection in this session 3, which is subsection 3.2, and what we're going to look at there is receipt and storage of materials. Receipts and storage of material. Receipts of goods that have been ordered and storage of materials. So this involves store operations, which include receiving goods, holding of goods, that is storing them, and then issuing the goods to the relevant department that is responsible for that. So that's about receipt and storage of materials. So basically you are doing there is receiving goods, holding the stock, and then issuing the stock or goods to the relevant department that requires them. Now we look at factors that are very necessary in the design, that influence the design of procedures for operating a store. Factors Okay, before getting there, let's provide some explanations in what we have just said. We said that the store operations include receiving goods, holding of stock, and then issuing goods. So I said let us provide some explanations here. Receiving of goods. When goods are received, they are checked for quantity, they are checked for description, against the delivery note that is being used, to deliver it. So it is the store that checks for all these items to ensure that the quantity is correct, to ensure that the description of the items supplied are in accordance with what has been ordered. Also, the store, like we said, is responsible for holding that store, arranging it in the order it should be through the coding system that has already been defined. So the store department organizes these stores in the sections that they should be, so that it will be easier for them to manage. They are also responsible for issuing it to the various departments that that may be in need of them at any point in time. So with that, we have looked at the store operation as it is. So like I said, what the other issue I want us to look at is factors that influence the design of procedures for operating a store. So those factors are: one, the volume of materials that is being handled is very important. The bigger the volume, the more concerned it is, or the more important it is to ensure that there is a proper procedure. So the volume of material handled is important, the frequency of the transactions is important, and then range and variety of stock items that is being received in store is also very, very important. The kind of demand on the store, that is depending on the size of the company, so the kind of demand on the store is also very, very important. So with that, I want us to also look at another factor, which is factors that facilitate effective material cost. Factors that facilitate effective material cost. This includes provide safety receipt and issue of materials, provision of safety receipt and issue of materials. 2, ensure easy location of materials. 3, facilitate easy identification through proper classification and coding. 4, keep adequate records of quantities held, and this can be achieved through the bin card, through the tally card, through the store ledger cards. All right. 5, adequate security measures must be put in place. Adequate security measures must be put in place. Materials should be adequately stored in such a way that they are appropriately protected. You must protect them against fire. You must protect those materials against rust, against theft, against deterioration, and against the effects of weather. So that's that. The next thing we'll try to look at is the pricing of the valuation of stock. Let us look at issues around valuation of stock. When materials are needed from stock, the user normally prepares a material requisition to enable them get these materials from the store. So they prepare a material requisition to request for stock. When the materials are issued by the store, they are issued at a price. That's what we mean by pricing of issuer. That's what we mean by pricing here. When the department that needs the store prepares their request through a material requisition and sent to store through the normal process. So the store that issues the goods will issue those goods at a price. Now the problem is usually that the problem now is what price will the store use to issue those stock to the user department. All right. So that's where the challenge comes. This is because materials in stock may have been purchased at varying prices from time to time. Because in a year, or for example, we are in June now. From January to June, materials in a big establishment, materials may have come in and out a number of times. So now the issue now is what price or what pricing system should be adopted by the store. So the objective of material pricing is: 1, to charge to production on a consistent basis a realistic price that let me put it this way. One of the objectives of material pricing is to determine the cost at which, a realistic cost at which those store items are sent to the user department. 2, to provide a satisfactory basis of valuing stocks at the end of the day. Recall that at the end of the day, all the items in the store will have to be valued to form the closing stock for that period of time. So a pricing system, there has to be a pricing system that will facilitate all these activities that we are talking about, that will facilitate the issue of stock to the relevant department and also facilitate valuing the stock at the end of the period. So let's look at the various methods. One of the key methods is first in, first out, followed by last in, last out. Simple average method is another one. Weighted average method is another one. Standard price is another one. Replacement price is another one. Specific identification is another pricing method. So let's look at them one by one. First in, first out. As the name implies, what you are saying here is in the order in which these materials are received in the store, those ones that came in first are the ones that are given out first of all. So this method uses the price of the first batch of the items received for all issues until all those items are exhausted, after which the price of the next batch will not be used. So as the batches come, that is the price that they use in pricing them. So the advantage of this is that it reflects the normal movement of materials. Just the way they come is the way it goes. So it reflects that. Stock is also valued using recent prices. Then the method is simple and easily understood. However, the disadvantage of this method is that the issue price, that price at which you are giving it out, may not reflect the current economic value. It may not recollect it, because if for example what I'm giving out to store is an item that came in January, so the price as at today may be different from what it was in January. So that's that. In period of inflation, it becomes an issue, all right, because price changes rapidly in periods of inflation. So that's some of the disadvantage with that. In the last in, first out method, this method uses the price of the last batch of materials received for all the issues until all the units from that batch is being exhausted. So just the opposite of the last in, first out. This one uses last in and first out. All the items that came in the last batch, the prices of those ones are being used until that batch is exhausted. So the advantage there is that the issue price may be close to the current economic value. Maybe depending on when that last batch came. And then it is also fairly simple to operate, just as the first in, first out. It uses the actual price, which is the very price that the last batch came in. The disadvantage here is that it is not realistic, because it is contrary to normal issue procedures, as you are using the last batch to this is, so it seems to kind of it's not logical, so to say, but then that's a method on its own. Stock values may be significantly understated depending on what inflation is all about. So let us look at a simple average method. Simple average method, as the name implies, is just an average method, very simple average method, adding up all the units and prices as they come, and then apply the simple average method and use it for all that comes in. So that's that for simple average method. And then the other methods also, we can read up that in our study materials. So with these, we have come to the end of session 3. With this, we have come to the end of session 3. And I want us to take a summary of what we have done in session 3. In this session 3, we have looked at material as a significant portion of the total cost of any business, whether it is manufacturing, especially manufacturing entities. material costs constitutes over 60% of the total cost. We also looked at the factors that facilitate effective material cost control systems. We also look at that, and we look at it to say that to control material costs is very, very necessary. So we need to create an enabling environment that will enable that company need to create an enabling environment that would facilitate cost control, methods or cost control measures. And then we look at a budget. In doing that, we look at setting up budgets, and making available sufficient and effective storage facilities. We're also looking at employing competent and qualified personnel to handle stocks, because it is a very sensitive and significant portion of the business of that company. So that is that, and with this we have come to the end of session 3. Thank you for listening.